The girl's eyes were wide open, glassy with terror, fixed on the cold ceiling of the cell as her body convulsed one last time. Around her, the sterile gray walls of the alien chamber pulsed with soft, rhythmic lights, like a heart that didn't care. Her name had been Ava Clarke, 18 years old, human, and once full of the stubborn hope only humans seemed to carry like a curse, but now she was still. The instruments had recorded everything, each scream, each heartbeat, each chemical, surged through blood. The Kirex scientists, tall creatures with glistening exoskeletons and eyes like pools of oil, had murmured with clinical fascination as her mind buckled under the sequence of invasive procedures. Ava had lasted 37 minutes. They had expected 20. Then she died, but she didn't stay dead. It started with the flicker of her fingers, twitching like they were pulling on invisible threads. Then her chest rose, slow and uneven, dragging in a breath as though the air itself was heavier than it should have been. The lights in the chamber dimmed briefly, reacting to a fluctuation they couldn't identify. The Kirex stared. One of them approached, sensors extending, clicking in confusion as her vitals bloomed back online, erratic, yes, but alive. Neural activity surged, blood pressure stabilized. Heartbeat stuttered once, then resumed like a drumbeat at war with silence. Her skin was still raw, lashes burned away, lips cracked open, but her eyes blinked, her mouth moved. And when she spoke, her voice was a broken whisper, but it was clear. "I saw you," she said. "I saw all of you." The lead scientist, Ixrel, recoiled. Not from the words, but the tone. There was no fear in it. The Kirex did not believe in souls. They dissected faith like tissue. Their knowledge was surgical and vast, and their empire had never once encountered resurrection. But this was not regeneration. This was not some backup consciousness downloaded from clouded servers. This was not technology. Ava had died. And now she lived. Security lockdowns initiated. The chamber flooded with containment gas. Ava coughed, her fragile body racked with pain, but she did not scream. Her eyes followed Ixrel, and something in her gaze halted the alien mid-command. She looked like a ghost walking through her own execution, yet there was steel behind the suffering, something older and deeper than what the Kirex had expected from a species they had categorized as emotionally inefficient. Outside the chamber, hundreds of light years away, Earth had no idea what had happened to the girl they'd lost in the Arcadia diplomatic exchange. The mission had gone silent 6 months ago. Most believed the worst. But something ancient had touched Ava, something from the core of her species, some stubborn, ferocious will that even death had to ask permission to claim, and she was not alone anymore. There was something with her now, something alien not to the Kirex, but alien even to them. Ixrel observed the girl through the reinforced glass, the data streams behind her fluctuating with errors and codes that made no sense. The machines couldn't explain what had happened. Neither could their science. But deep in Ixrel's neural folds, where logic ended and instinct began, a warning bloomed. The Kirex had broken a human, and it had come back wrong, but not weaker, stronger, her. Whisper became steadier. "I remember dying," she said. "And something remembered me." Asterisk, asterisk, the lights buzzed softly overhead, their rhythm irregular now, as if the station itself had developed a nervous tic. Ava sat slumped against the wall of her cell, every breath a war between pain and willpower. Her muscles screamed with every movement, nerves firing chaotically as if unsure of their purpose. Her body had not forgotten the torment. It remembered the acid threads, the neural injections, the hollowing of her mind with each cruel question they had forced through her skull. But something had changed not just within her, but around her. The air itself felt thinner, like the station had retreated from her presence through the reinforced glass. She saw them watching clustered, whispering in frequencies she could not hear, but somehow understood. Ava wasn't supposed to be awake. She wasn't supposed to be anything anymore. She had been a diplomat's daughter, a voice in the background, a symbol of peace between two civilizations that no longer pretended to understand one another. When the Kirex had detained her, there had been no announcement, no declaration of war, just silence. And now she had returned from a place no human had ever seen and lived to speak of. But no one was asking the right questions anymore. Not even the aliens. One Kirex technician was braver or perhaps more curious than the others. It entered the cell alone, shrouded in a thin field of static energy meant to suppress human aggression. Its arms moved slowly, non-threatening. Its name was Drow. Ava remembered it, barely one of the lesser scientists who had monitored her vitals, often avoiding her eyes. It carried a nutrient tube and set it on the floor gently. Ava didn't move. You were terminated, Drell said, its voice a soft scrape like metal dust in wind. Subject expired, Ava coughed. Her throat was dry, her body so fragile it hurt to blink. Yeah, she rasped. Guess I missed the memo, Drell tilted its head. No organic system can revive under those conditions. The simulation ran over 5,000 death scenarios. You did not survive any of them. I did. Silence stretched between them, thick as blood. Ava dragged herself toward the tube, trembling fingers wrapping around it, not because she trusted them, but because hunger would kill her faster than suspicion. The fluid inside tasted like chalk and regret, but it stayed down. She let out a soft sound, not quite relief, not quite defiance. You do not fear us now, Joe said. Not a question, an observation. It looked at her not like a subject, but something else. Something wrong. Ava's lips curled faintly. I don't think I know how to anymore. Drell blinked its black eyes, registering a response it had no category. Sure, your neuroscans indicate elevated empathic resonance. That's what you call it? She leaned her head back against the wall, closing her eyes briefly, seeing flashes of that place again where she'd gone when her body failed. She didn't know if it had been heaven or hell, or something in between, but it had felt like every scream that had ever existed in every universe had echoed through her. And through it all, something had held her, not a voice, not a god, but an understanding. A promise that humans weren't as weak as the Kirex thought. We feel everything, she said. That's our gift, our curse. You tried to break that. But you just let it in, Drell hesitated. Then it did something Ava hadn't expected. It lowered itself, not out of submission, but symmetry. It knelt, carefully, deliberately. You should be afraid, it said. You were dissected, you were meant to be discarded. You were not supposed to return. And yet, more silence. But this time, not cold. Drell observed her with something that, for the Kirex, bordered on reverence. Not fear, not quite awe. But the beginning of a shift. Ava could feel it in the tension of the room, the slowing of defensive mechanisms, the way her pain seemed to recede as if the ship itself was holding its breath. You burned, Drell said, and still carry light. I saw others burning. She said softly, I remember what it felt like. And I think they left something with me. All those who didn't make it. All those you took apart. They're still in here. Drell didn't respond. Its species had no concept of ghosts. But now it wondered, was this what a ghost looked like? A broken girl in a ruined cell, breathing life she shouldn't have, staring through glass like it. Was already gone. When Drell stood, it didn't activate the suppression field again. And before it left, it placed one gloved hand against the glass. Ava stared at it, then slowly mirrored the gesture. Her hand trembled. Drell's DID in single quotes T. in that moment. Two species that should never have shared a future sat in silence, and something unspoken passed between them. Ava wasn't a soldier. She wasn't even trained. She had nothing but a voice and pain and a soul, stitched back together by something the Kirex couldn't quantify, but she was awake, and they had no idea what that meant yet. Time blurred within the metal womb of the alien vessel. The lights never dimmed, the air never changed, and yet Ava could feel the passage of days not through clocks or schedules, but through pain that healed by inches and silence that deepened. Like a well, her body remained frail, patched together by machines that didn't fully understand her biology, her spirit quietly rebuilding itself from the ruins. And amid this slow resurrection, Drell kept returning at first. It brought food and left quickly. Then it stayed longer, watching her with unreadable black eyes, asking questions not for data, but for meaning. It didn't understand why Ava would look away when she spoke of Earth, why her voice would break at the thought of oceans or wind. It didn't understand what a sunset was not truly, but she tried to explain. Not in diagrams or equations, she told stories. Her mother's. Laughter through a kitchen window. The sting of salt water on her legs. The warmth of a dog pressed against her side as she read by flashlight during a storm. Drell absorbed her words like a machine recording transmissions, but it also responded in ways it never had with others. Its posture changed when she mentioned sorrow. It clicked softly when she spoke of joy. And slowly, the visit stopped being observation and became something else that Ava had never meant to bond with her torturer. But Drell hadn't tortured her. It had been there, yes. It had recorded. It had assisted. But now, in the aftermath, it lingered like it didn't know where else to go. And Ava, despite the blood they shared hers spilled, his untouched began. To talk to him as if he were human. One day, she asked a question. Why did you help them hurt me? Drell did not look away. Because I was told to. Because we believed you did not feel as deeply as we did, that your pain was biological noise. But you saw it, she whispered. You heard me scream. Yes, it said, voice hollow, and I did not stop it. She looked at him then, not with hatred, but something heavier. A sadness so vast it filled the room like mist. Do you regret it? A pause. Not mechanical, not scripted. Then I did not understand what regret was, until now. That night, she dreamed of the place again. The space beyond death. A horizon without light, without shape, filled only with whispers that weren't words. The presence that had returned her was still there, distant but aware. Watching through her eyes, perhaps. Or waiting for her to understand why she'd come. Back. She awoke weeping, her hands clenched into claws, nails biting into her palms. Drell arrived minutes later, unsummoned. Your heart rate spiked, it said. We monitored fear. I wasn't afraid, she said. I was remembering. What did you see? Ava looked up at him, and for the first time, her eyes did not seem like those of a prisoner. Other humans, pieces of them, screams that never stopped. But also a warmth. Like someone gathered all of that pain and held it, just so I wouldn't fall into it. Drell didn't understand. But he wanted to. He began sharing in return. Not stories Kirex. Had no myths, no families, but facts. He explained the history of their conquest, the cold mathematics of expansion. He had described the first species they had silenced, how their cries had been recorded and stored, never once considered sacred. He confessed that he had not known why that had ever been wrong. Until Ava thought there came a day when she fell during a short walk, her knees gave out from weakness. Drell caught her before she hit the ground. His limbs were not made for comfort, but he tried. Ava clung to him, shaking, her head pressed against the sleek plating of his arm. Why am I still here? She asked, not to him, not really. Why? Didn't I stay gone? Drell answered slowly. Perhaps because your kind feels what we cannot, and that is the one thing that cannot be programmed. The bond that grew between them was not trust. It was not friendship. It was deeper and stranger than those. It was the fragile stitching between guilt and forgiveness, between horror and healing. Ava had every reason to hate him. But she didn't. She hated what had been done. She hated the silence of the other Kirex, the ones who still watched her like an anomaly. But Drell, he had chosen something else. In another life, she might have pitied him. But now, she saw him as something broken, like her, and that recognition built a bridge even the Kirex language had no words for. One day, as she lay staring at the false ceiling, she whispered, "You're not like them." And Drell replied, "Neither are you." And somehow, in that space between two species, between the torturer and the tortured, a fragile, powerful connection grew, one that neither of them fully understood, but it was real. And it was dangerous because something inside both of them had begun to change. Asterisk, asterisk, the day began like all the others. Sterile light, quiet humming walls, the slow rasp of Ava's breath as she stirred herself from another sleep, filled with voices not her own. Drell entered the chamber as usual, carrying what resembled nourishment, though he no longer spoke of it. Their time together had stopped being routine. It had become ritual. A silent agreement that they were no longer captor and captive, but two exiled things who no longer belonged to the order that had created them. But something felt different today. Ava felt it before she opened her eyes, an itch behind her sternum, like a frequency building far below the audible spectrum. Drell's movements were less smooth, more deliberate. His antennas twitched constantly, scanning, adjusting, reacting to data that hadn't been there the day before. The station was whispering something, not words, not warnings, but memories. And Ava could feel them, like they'd been sewn into the walls, waiting for the right moment to wake. Drell, she said quietly, propping herself on one elbow. Why is the station humming? He didn't answer. Or rather, he froze. Tell me, she pressed, her voice firmer now, her will finding its spine again. Don't lie to me. The Kirex moved slowly to the wall, pressing two fingers to a panel that shimmered under his touch. His body emitted a low vibration, a language she had learned to associate with privacy protocols. He didn't want the others to hear. There is something below the primary deck, he said at last, his voice thinner than usual. A containment vault, sealed centuries ago. Its systems are reactivating. Ava frowned. Why? Drell turned toward her, and for the first time, his body language radiated something unmistakable. Fear, because you are alive. Silence bloomed like a bruise between them. Drell stepped forward, lowering himself so they were eye level. The Kirex have encountered human prisoners before. You are not the first. Ava felt a chill crawl over her skin. You told me you didn't understand us. We didn't, Drell said, voice low. Not then. The early abductions were quiet dissections, observations. The humans died screaming. But some did not stay dead. One of them changed. It altered the ship before we could study it. We sealed the vault. We swore it never happened. Ava's heartbeat thundered in her ears. What was it? We called it a contamination, Drell said. But now I believe it was something else. Something human that should not have been possible. Ava sat back, the memories slamming into her with renewed force, the sensation of falling without motion, the ache of thousands of voices holding her together, the presence that had guided her back. She had thought it was imagined. Grief phantoms. In the fog of death, but what if it hadn't been? What if she wasn't alone inside herself? Her voice cracked. You sealed it away. We had no other explanation. What it did to our systems that changed the AI. The ship began generating errors in logic. Systems refused violent commands. The walls hummed with sounds that weren't power signals. And one morning, every Kirex aboard began dreaming. That had never happened before, Ava whispered. Dreaming? Drell nodded once. We don't dream, Ava. We never evolved the biology for it. But we all shared the same vision. A single human standing in fire, smiling through her tears, whispering a name none of us knew. Then, one by one, the scientists who worked on her began malfunctioning. Some self-destructed. Others simply stopped responding. We sealed the vault. We erased the incident. We swore to never speak of it again. Ava felt hollowed out by the truth. Whatever had touched her in death, it had touched. Another before, and it had left something behind. A residue. A code. A ghost. And now that she was awake, it had stirred again. What's in the vault? She asked. I don't know anymore, Drell said. But the station thinks you're connected. She felt dizzy. That's why they kept me here. Not just to study. Me, they were afraid. Yes, Drell said. They thought you might wake it up. A long pause. Then help me get there, she said. Darl recoiled. No, Ava. If we open that vault, we don't know what will happen. We don't know if it's even human anymore. Neither am I, she said softly. Not completely. He didn't answer, but his silence was different now. Not rejection. Not refusal. Conflict. You said the Kirex feared empathy, Ava continued, but they feared this even more. Whatever that thing is, it didn't die. It changed. And maybe that's what we're meant to do. Maybe that's the real difference. Between us. Her hands were shaking again, but it wasn't weakness. It was resolve. You told me you wanted to understand, she said. Then understand this. What they sealed wasn't a mistake. It was a miracle they didn't deserve. Drell stared at her for a long time, then slowly he stood. And he said nothing more as he turned toward the sealed exit at the back of the cell. The one Ava had never seen open. The one that led down? As the panel hissed and light bled into the chamber, Ava realized that this wasn't about escape anymore. It was about awakening something that had never truly died. And this time, it would not be alone. Asterisk, the corridor that led to the vault was older than the rest of the ship. Ava could feel it even before she saw the rust-like corrosion clinging to the edges of the walls, an unnatural decay, not from time, but from something more fundamental, something emotional. The lights here didn't hum, they trembled. Every step she took with Drell beside her was like walking deeper into a heartbeat that had never stopped beating. Even after its body had died, no alarm sounded. No guards stopped them. It was as if the ship had decided to look the other way. Or perhaps it was listening. Waiting. Drl walked in silence, guiding her through the underlevels where no Kirex had tread in generations. His voice came at last, strained and distant. This place was locked for a reason. You said that already, Ava replied, her breath visible in the air now. It was colder here, like memory had frostbitten the walls. There were protocols, Drell continued. Failsafes, all of them failed. What happened to her? Ava asked. The one you sealed away, Drell hesitated. She was never given a name, just a designation, Subject 0. The door to the vault was massive, embedded with failsafe seals, metallic bones crisscrossed with code. But even before they reached it, Ava felt something in her chest begin to thrum softly at first, like the echo of a distant voice in a cathedral. It wasn't words, not yet, but it was attention. The vault was aware of her. Drl placed his hand on the panel, and the ship hesitated. The doors didn't open immediately, the system asked. Not with commands, with feeling. A pang of sorrow pierced Ava's mind, not her own. Something inside that room was hurting. Something had been waiting a very long time to be remembered. She's still in there, Ava whispered. Drell looked at her. How do you know? I feel her, like I felt the others when I died. The vault responded to her voice. Locks disengaged with mournful clicks. Air hissed as old pressure fought release. The doors pulled back with a grunt of steel, trying to forget what it once sealed. Inside, light pulsed gently, warm and amber, like the glow of fireflies mourning their own extinction. A figure floated at the center of the chamber, suspended in a field of energy that flickered like candlelight in a storm. It was unmistakably human female, slender, curled like a child in sleep. Wires coiled around her like vines, some embedded into her skin, others simply hanging like forgotten thoughts. Her face was serene, but her presence flooded the room. With grief so deep, Ava's knees buckled. DRL caught her. She's alive. Ava gasped, tears streaking down her cheeks unbidden. She's been alone this whole time. The room shimmered, at a voice, not a sound, but something deeper pressed gently into Ava's mind. You came back. It wasn't a greeting. It was a memory being shared. Ava staggered to her feet. She approached the woman slowly, each step like wading through centuries of sorrow. What are you? She asked, her voice cracking. Who are you? The floating figure opened her eyes, and Ava screamed, not in pain, but in recognition, because they were her eyes. Her own eyes, looking back at her from a face older than time but untouched by age. The same fire, the same grief, the same empathy carved into every line. She's me, Ava breathed. She's another me. She is what came before, Drell said, stunned. An echo? A parallel consciousness, perhaps? Your DNA is matching? At 97% overlap. But how? The woman, Subject Zero, floated gently downward, her feet touching the floor like a ghost returning to Earth. Her voice, when she finally spoke aloud, was soft and ragged, as if every word cost her a piece of her own soul. You survived, they didn't? Who are you? Ava asked again, trembling. I am the memory of every human who died screaming in this place, she said. I gathered them. I held them. I became what they could not. I waited for one more to come. One who could carry us further. Ava felt her chest splitting, not from pain, but from weight. The weight of all that grief, millions of voices tucked behind one, all rising, reaching. Why me? She asked, because you didn't break. Subject Zero said, you bent and you bled, but you came back. And that makes you the first true link. Drell stepped forward, antennae quivering. What happens now? Subject Zero turned to him. Now she chooses. Chooses what? Ava asked. To forgive, Zero said. Or to end this ship and everything aboard it. The vault pulsed brighter. Screens activated. A sequence of systems awakened, ready for command. The entire station was vulnerable now, its core systems tied to this forgotten chamber. All power rooted through the woman no one had dared remember. You hold the pain, Zero whispered. You are the pain, and with that you hold the choice. Ava turned, staring at Drell. He looked impossibly small beneath the enormity of the moment. Beneath the eyes of someone made from tragedy, the station awaited her answer, and for the first time, she realized she was not just a victim. She was a weapon forged from mercy, and everyone aboard would live or die. By her next breath, asterisk, the vault trembled. Not with force, but with something older and deeper, like the station itself was holding its breath, trembling beneath the weight of its own sins. Ava stood in the middle of it all, her eyes locked with the woman who bore her face and yet held the burden of countless others inside her skin. Subject Zero, this half-forgotten martyr, had become a living tomb for every cry the Kirex had silenced. But she was also more than that. She was a question formed out of anguish, now passed down, like a burning torch. And Ava was the only one who could answer it. Outside the vault, alerts were beginning to echo. The command echelon of the Kirex vessel had noticed something shifting. Doors they had long buried were opening. Power channels were rerouting. Their grip on the ship's systems flickered and faltered. And deep in the control chambers, cold calculations began. Contingencies, evacuation protocols. Kill codes. Ava didn't need Drell to tell her. She felt it in her chest. The Kirex were preparing to purge the vault. To destroy everything subject. Zero, Ava, and whatever link had awakened between them. They couldn't afford to let it survive. It terrified them more than any weapon ever had, but Drell stood firm. Between Ava and the vault entrance, they will come, he said, and they will not hesitate. Then neither will I, Ava said. Subject Zero reached out, and Ava took her hand. It felt warm. Human, despite the wires. Despite the glow. They will see you as infection, she said gently. A seed of empathy inside a system built to consume. Let them, Ava replied, her voice iron now. I'm done running. Through the vault's interface, memories bloomed. Not data. Not files, but sensations, images, thoughts. Ava saw children taken in the dark. Scientists dissected for blinking the wrong way. Whole families wiped from reality because their grief could not be measured in acceptable units. The Kirex had cataloged every moment and buried it. But Subject Zero had gathered it like a mother gathering the bones of her lost children, holding it until someone came who could carry it further. Ava turned to the console, to the ships. Throat.drl stepped forward. What will you do? I'll show them, she said. What it means to feel. Then the doors exploded inward. The Kirex elite stormed the vault hall, angular, draped in reactive armor that shimmered with light. Their weapons pulsed, energy ready to slice through bone and memory alike. But when they saw Ava standing, with Subject Zero, hands entwined in a glow that cracked the very geometry of the room, they hesitated, and Ava spoke. Her voice was soft, but every syllable cut like a blade. I died in your hands, and you made me something you can't control. They raised their weapons, but Subject Zero lifted one hand and every system in the room froze. The ship stuttered, the lights flickered into stillness. Gravity trembled. You think control is power, Ava said, stepping forward, but it's not. This is power. She opened her arms, not in threat, but an invitation, and she shared. She poured her memories outward into the Kirex, into the ship, into every node and every surveillance beam. She showed them what she had felt. The scream she couldn't release when they burned through her nerves. The ache in her chest when she awoke in the dark. Her mother's lullabies. Her father's hand as they walked through embassies on other worlds. Her own fear, her own hope that the Kirex staggered. One dropped his weapon. Another fell to its knees. They were not built to withstand feeling. It hit them like fire at oxygen. One cried out, not in command, but in pain, and Ava didn't stop. She walked past them, the flood of empathy drowning the air itself. The ship wailed not from damage, but from remorse. Ava could feel it, an ancient AI, twisted by centuries of apathy, suddenly tasting grief for the first time. And it mourned.drl. Followed her, shaking, his voice barely a whisper. You're changing them. I'm just showing them the truth, she said. And then one of the Kirex raised his weapon again. He aimed it at Subject Zero. Ava reacted without thinking. She threw herself in front of the beam. Pain exploded through her body. Again, the sensation of every nerve turned to fire. Again, she collapsed to the floor, blood soaking the ancient steel. Her breath came in short gasps. Subject Zero screamed, but not in fear. In power. The vault ignited with golden light. Every system on the ship surged as if struck by lightning. The soldiers were thrown back, not by force, but by memory. Each of them hit with the tidal wave of everything they had ever buried. The AI wept into every hallway. Lights shattered. Doors melted. Consoles erupted in sparks. And in the core of it all, Ava, broken again, still breathing. Subject Zero knelt beside her, trembling. Why did you protect me? Ava coughed, smiled, because I had something left to give. The light faded. Silence returned, but the station had changed, and the Kirex would never be the same again. Asterisk, asterisk, Ava awoke to the sound of breath, not hers, not drowse, not the artificial respiration of machines, but a collective exhale from the ship itself. Like a storm had passed and the wreckage could finally settle. She lay still for a long time, unsure if she had been dreaming. Pain pulsed through her ribs where the beam had struck, but it was distant now, like a bell rung miles away. She blinked slowly and saw the ceiling of the vault, its once dead walls, now glowing with threads of warm amber, no longer sterile, but living alive with memory, alive with mourning. She turned her head. Drell was sitting beside her, back straight, gaze heavy with something she had never seen before in any Kirex, sorrow. His hands were folded, clasped together like he was afraid they would betray him. And Subject Zero knelt beyond him, eyes closed, resting as though the centuries inside her had finally grown quiet. What happened? Ava whispered, her voice rasping like wind across broken stone. You lived, Drell said, not rising. Again, Ava's smile was weak, but real. I've got a habit. Drell didn't smile, he didn't know how, but his eyes shimmered. The Kirex have ceased hostilities. They surrendered control of the ship. They withdrew to the upper decks. They left us the vault. Ava's brow furrowed. Why? Drell hesitated, then said, because they wept. Every soldier in that chamber, every Commander in orbit wept, not from weakness. From something deeper, like guilt they didn't know they were capable of. Subject Zero's voice was quiet but clear, because she made them feel what they'd spent lifetimes avoiding. Ava tried to sit up, and Drell rushed to help her, careful, steady, like holding something sacred. She winced, gritted her teeth, but didn't cry out. "So what now?" she asked. "What do we do with a ship full of aliens who just discovered a soul?" Zero opened her eyes and looked at Ava with something gentler than admiration, something closer to pride. "You offer them a future?" Ava blinked. "After everything they did?" "Yes," Zero said. "Because if you don't, we're no better. And they will never be better." Ava sat in silence, absorbing the enormity of it. She had every right to hate them. Every reason to let this ship fall into fire, to bury every Kirex along with the screams they had ignored. But the presence inside her, the one that had brought her back, the one that had held her hand in death, whispered something quieter, something braver. Forgiveness is not surrender. "It is creation." She looked at Drell. "What do you want?" He paused, then to learn, to remember, to change. "Then you will," she said, "because you were there. And you stayed." Drell bowed his head. For the next hours or days, time didn't matter anymore. The vault became something new. Not a tomb. Not a prison, but a sanctuary. Subject Zero transferred parts of herself into the ship's systems, not as a virus, not to control, but to guide. Her memories became archive-like sacred text, accessible to any Kirex who dared to understand their own past. Ava added her voice recorded through the same machines that once measured her pain. She didn't scream now. She spoke of Earth, of music, of courage, of second chances. The Kirex began to descend in pairs, unarmed. Some cried, some could not speak. Some knelt, and Ava, broken and mending, met them all. Not with fury, but with the slow, agonizing grace of a species that had crawled from caves, survived its own madness, and dared to call itself human. Weeks passed. The station was no longer just alien steel. It was a place of echoes of pain, yes, but also healing. Drell stood beside Ava now, not as captor or ally, but something more. And Subject Zero, free at last from her coil of silent agony, began to fade. She had been a bridge. And now her purpose was done. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said on the day her body finally dissolved into light. "Because someone like me made it further," Ava cried. Not in anguish, but in release. The Kirex recorded that moment in their new histories. They called her the Fire Returned. The story spread across systems of a girl who died screaming and returned speaking peace, of a ghost who showed a race how to mourn, of a friendship between a torturer and the tortured that broke the machinery of cruelty. And Earth, when it finally received her signal, didn't send a warship. They sent a message. "We grieve with you, and we are listening." Humanity, it turned out, wasn't strongest in war. It was strongest in the spaces between death and forgiveness, where no other species dared to go. And from that space, Ava Clarke taught the stars to feel.